Okay, welcome back, and today we're going to be making some hard surface brushes. First of all, I want to say how wrong I was about the scrape brush. I know in the last video I said that the flatten and the scrape I found too aggressive. Well, I've been actually playing with those quite a bit and just tweaking the settings, and I had to bring some of the values down a bit on the scrape just to make it manageable, but I'll get to the scrape a little bit later on, and why I think I'm going to actually switch to that brush in the future. But I've got settings for a smooth brush and the scrape, so we'll start with the smooth. Let's see, so let's get the smooth brush, and I'm just going to use the N key to bring up this menu. I like to keep this menu here so that I can keep this remesh. I constantly sort of remeshing, so I like to keep this one open. Right, so first of all, because I'm using a tablet, on the smooth brush I like to keep the strength up high, and this will all depend on your tablet settings. If I show you mine, look, mine's just right in the middle there. I find that's quite a good happy medium. I think it's the same in Photoshop for me. So this will depend. You'll have to kind of play with this and see whereabouts you fall in the sensitivity and where you're comfortable with the brush. But let's get on with the settings. So that's full power for me on this one. Normal radius I've got at 0.2. Hardness is also 0.2. And I don't really know what all these individual things do. I've just played with every one of these values until I've got the brush to do what I want it to do. So I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of guys out there that actually know what these things are, but I don't. I've just been playing around with it. Let's see, hardness 0.2. Go to advanced, front faces only. Don't want a texture. Stroke. The spacing, I've got that at 1. And let me see. Input samples. I think I put that up slightly to 10. And the fall off, again, you can play with this. I've gone through all of them and even created a few of my own just to see. But I've always come back to the smoother. I think I've got that on scrape as well. So that's just what I'm going to use anyway for the time being. So if I just show you, I'm actually a bit hard on this matte cap. I've got the resolution's quite high on this. Normally, when I'm carving out big shapes, I've got it on a lot lower resolution than this, but I just kind of wanted to show you the edge quality you can get with these brushes. So the problem with the smooth brush out the gate is it's quite destructive. It just kind of melts things. But with this brush, with these settings, you can smooth off a surface quite nicely. The problem with this brush, and the scrape isn't without its problems also, but if, say, you're trying to join two edges together, right? So let's say this is a panel, this is a panel. If you want to get this sharp, what tends to happen with this brush is you can do it. You just have to make sure that your brush itself is small, and you kind of just bring the edge in, right? And you can push the edge of the brush to the surface and bring it in. But with this brush, it might not help because it's helping me there because it's on symmetry. So if I just quickly, I think it's also lagging quite a bit because I'm screen recording, but I just want to show you what I mean with this brush. So this edge here, right, if I wanted to get that sharp, I would just kind of keep working the surface, getting the brush smaller towards that part, right? And then just, smoothing out anything around it, just so I keep always checking the angles, to see how the light falls on the bumps and things like that, so I can smooth those out. But you can see that I can get it pretty tight. And, if I went in smaller, I could bring it in even tighter. But see how small my brush is now. And this is another problem with this brush as well, is if you're not careful, you'll end up pushing this edge one side to the other, and you're constantly sort of, pushing it. That's not a problem. It's workable, and I've done it this way this far. And then you just kind of make it big again just to smooth out any strokes you've made either side. But you have to be real careful again, because if you go slightly over it, you're going to end up destroying that edge. But this is a good brush. Like I said, I've used it to this point to create everything on the model. And I just find it, I've found it a real manageable hard surface brush. Actually, let's just turn down the resolution a little bit, because it's lagging a bit. Yeah, that's better. So yeah, like I said, this brush, give it a try and see what you think, because you can get some real nice surfaces with it. It's a really nice refining brush just for polishing those surfaces to get them nice and smooth. But let's go to the scrape now, and I'll just show you some of the differences. The settings on this are actually very similar to my smooth. So normal radius. Now on this one I do keep the strength at 3, because it gets a bit unruly if you have it powerful, and I'll show you why. So yeah, normal radius is 0.2. Hardness is also 0.2. Right, I do have the plane trim on as well, because I found that it helps at a low strength just to even out the surface a bit more. That's what I found anyway. I've left it at 0.5 as well. The area radius, I've actually turned that down slightly to 0.7. Front faces, leave accumulate on. I've tried it without, and you still have to work the surface, even with accumulate off. So I just left it on because it kind of, at a low strength, it doesn't really make much of a difference. Spacing, I think I've turned that down to 1. Input samples at 10. And the fall off, again, I've put it on smoother. Okay, so let's try the same thing that we did up here, right? Just this kind of shape. And you can see straight away that this brush is more aggressive, but still workable. At 0.3. See, you still get that kind of nice smooth surface. What can happen is if I turn this up, you can get this kind of wobbly. I mean, this is great for carving out, a section, but if you want to kind of refine this, you can do it if you just press very lightly, but it's clumsy, and you'll end up taking away too much of the surface. So I find if you keep this at 0.3, or maybe even at 0.2 if you're doing some really fine work, that's a good happy medium. But this is where this brush really comes into its own. Remember what I was saying about this edge here, the way you have to be careful on either side, and that all depends on how crisp you keep this edge. This brush is completely different. So if I say we want to, this was a panel, this was a panel, we wanted a nice kind of cut here, a nice crease. I'm just going to quickly plane this surface away. You can go nice and big with this brush too. Like I said, it still takes work to get that smooth, but then it's the same with the smooth brush. You're just constantly checking your angles to make sure you've got the area all fully smooth. But watch this edge. Okay, notice how big my brush is still. And I'll go to this side. Might make it a bit smaller. But this brush just responds so much better to like the edge preservation. So if I go up large again and start polishing this, because I've made some strokes, it barely even touches that edge. And this is great because if you've put in some details, and you find that for whatever reason you've made the surface, kind of lumpy, it also respects cavities quite well. So if you go in with a fine brush and make those adjustments, you can then go over with a slightly bigger brush and then smooth out the unwanted brush strokes, but still keeping those sharp edges. So both of these brushes are good, for hard surface, and with a bit of work, they'll get you to where you need to be with it. But they just, they both have their downfalls. The scrape is that you can quickly get these divots in your surface. But the good thing is, obviously, if you hold control, you can fill these because it's inverted to fill on default. Obviously, you can turn that off if you want to, but and then you just lightly plane over the surface again. So it's this constant filling the gaps, buffing it, filling it in, buffing it. I would do that with the smooth as well. I used to do it with smooth and inflate, so it's exactly the same thing. So let's just quickly create a shape with with this. So this is how I would use it on the model, or how I'm going to use it. Because like I said, I've just been playing with this really and just discovered how good this brush really is. So I've known from watching other videos that hard surface sculpting is possible in Blender. I just didn't really know how these people were doing it. And it's not like I haven't got their brush settings and things like that, but I guess it just takes a while to to get used to it. You also, with the scrape, you have to be careful on like these kind of rounded edges, because it will want to plane flat. So if you press very very lightly, just so that you keep that edge. Constantly checking just to get rid of those bumps. And I'm not going to get it perfect, because I'm just trying to show what you can do with this, but when you're working with them, just work till you get it to the level that you're happy with. Let's kind of flatten things off up here, so I'll get a bit more pressure. Create a nice. See, with the smooth, this would be quite difficult to get where these lines meet like this. Like I said, it's not impossible, because you just make the brush smaller and just take more time and care as you'll go into those edges. But here you can see how big I'm leaving the brush, and I can just kind of push the edge where I want it to go. And I find here, if I push this edge up here, then I can fill this part. And then buff it again. So constantly just reworking it. If you really want to keep that edge, obviously you can just go smaller with your brush, fill this part in. But it's just this ability to keep your brush larger. It's just really good. Take care of that a little bit. Fill this just to level it off a little bit more. Even with how sharp the scrape can get, we say like that line there, you can still, if you keep it large and you're soft enough, you can still get it pretty smooth, similar to like what a smooth would do for you. It is trickier with a scrape because you have to be so careful, because it is such a strong brush. But then just knock it down, 0.2 or something, and you should be fine. Let's give it a hit with a large brush size. So what I tend to do once I've got a shape and I've carved it out a bit, I'll go in with a big brush just to very lightly kind of go over the surface, just to go over any unwanted strokes I've made. But yeah, just play around with these and see what you think. See here, like if I wanted to, make a shape out of this, even with this part, I mean, I can just create it like this, same as I would the smooth, right? That kind of shape. But then with this over, and you can see I'm big, I've got the brush here, I would just lightly go over it, just to smooth over the surface a bit, so it's right. So you still have to be careful, just like with the smooth, you have to be. The smooth is more forgiving, but this brush, I think if you kind of practice with it, and I need more work with it, to be honest, but I'll practice more on my model with it. But I think I'm going to switch to this brush going forwards, because these lines, it's just so much easier to get this finish. And then from here, we can go on a crease. I'm not going to get great creases at this resolution. Actually, let's put it up now. Quickly remesh this, just to get slightly better cut lines on it. Right, let's see, turn it up to around 0.6. Stabilize stroke. And this is pretty much, what I would do. To create some cut lines on pieces like this. Okay, so you have to be careful with that, obviously, things like that when you're doing cut lines with a crease brush. But this is just to show, really, once I've polished the surface, how I would treat it. And you can quickly, once you've put in these lines, you can quickly see how much more polish it makes it appear. Let's try some bigger ones. So once the brush has done all the heavy work, you just go in there and start playing around. So that's the smooth and the scrape, the way that I'm currently using them. I just want to show you quickly the blob. This one, sort of like makes this bump, right? I've never really used this brush much. I tend to use the inflate instead of this, and I use the inflate quite a lot now. I use that as a drawing brush, but this brush I found is really good for doing sort of quick sci-fi shapes. So if you just leave everything as it is on the brush settings apart from hardness, so if we put this up to say 0.5, you get a hard top on the brush like this, right? I find it easier to use the mouse with this. So what I've been doing is, I use this shape a lot. So holding Control, obviously you dig in, but this is great. If you kind of haven't got a lot of alphas at hand, or you don't want to use alphas, you can do a lot with the brushes. So let's just do like one there, maybe go smaller, holding Control, and smaller again, bring it out. See what I mean? Back to crease. Yeah, you can quickly create these kind of shapes just with a brush. So pretty cool. So yeah, that's just how I'm using brushes at the moment. And it's early days, with the scrape and the smooth. So if there's any tweaks that I make, I'll mention it in the later videos whilst I'm working on the model. But for now, just give these a try and see if they work for you. And yeah, I'm definitely going to give this scrape a good trial in the next part of the model. Anyway, that's it for now. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.